These games are not identical. Both cartridges contain a USA release of Super Mario Bros. 3 for the original NES, but there are differences between the two on both the outside and the inside. Brothers is in different places. Under the Nintendo seal of quality, one cart has a trademark symbol and the other has a registered trademark symbol. And the most important difference is the text at the bottom of the two labels. NES USA. This right side cartridge has an extra -1 after it. It is considered to be revision 1 of Super Mario Bros. 3 and contains changes to the game's code and data when compared to its earlier counterpart, revision 0. We know some differences thanks to observations of gameplay, but finding other changes requires a dive into the bytes inside the ROMs. What changed and when did it happen? We're gonna find out. Let's establish a timeline for the NES Mario 3 cartridge's USA release. If you were around at the time, you know that Mario 3's arrival was a pretty big deal. As for acquiring the game at launch in the States, pre-orders weren't really a thing. You just had to call around and hope someone had the game in stock. The documented release date would appear to be February the 12th, 1990, according to Nintendo's own website. I bought this revision 0 copy at launch. I can't quite remember the exact date I picked it up. It was maybe very early March. I remember playing it heavily during spring break. Nintendo Power, the subscription-based advertisement service for Nintendo, released a Mario 3 strategy guide in June of 1990, and it contains some variations in terms used within Mario 3. Perhaps the most interesting is the subject of Kuribo's shoe. Who is Kuribo? After completing World 2, the princess sends a letter stating that you can stomp on enemies using Kuribo's shoe, or at least that is what it says in my copy of the game. In the Revision 1 release, she instead writes Goomba's shoe. Kuribo is the Japanese name for Goomba, and of course when we stumble upon the shoe in World 5-3, it is in use by a Goomba. So among the changes we receive in this newer release is a name correction for the shoe's owner. The strategy guide refers to it as Kuribo's shoe in a screenshot of the princess's letter after World 2, as well as on the strategy page for World 5-3. Curiously, the earlier pages of the strategy guide list the shoe as Kuribo's Goomba. Kuribo's shoe is mentioned in the description, but goodness knows what happened here. You'd think that the revised release took care of business. There, we fixed the name. This was not the case. 1993's Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo reverted to the original mistake, if you'll allow that word. In fact, All-Stars seems to be based on the Revision 0 script. More on that later. By the way, the original Famicom release of Mario 3 mentions the shoe in the letter at the end of World 3. The text was localized for both the World 2 and the World 3 letters of the Famicom version, but their arrival times in the game were swapped. How is this relevant? Well, I'm glad you asked. When 2003's Super Mario Advance 4 was released for the Game Boy Advance, the princess's letters were switched back to their original world placement used in the Famicom version, and the localization uses Goomba's shoe once again. 1988, 1990, 1993, 2003. When was Rev 1 of the NES cartridge released? Perhaps now would be a good time to dive into the cartridges and find out, and I mean that literally. If we open my Rev 0 launch cartridge from March 1990, we can get some information from the markings on the program ROM and the character ROM chips contained on the PCB. Notice the NES UM0 markings on both of them, therefore Revision 0. We also have date codes. The program ROM reads 8952, the 52nd week of 1989, and the character ROM reads 9003, the 3rd week of 1990. This tells us when the ROMs were manufactured. Other chips on the PCB have dates that get us closer to when the cartridge itself was perhaps made, but let's stay focused on the ROMs. If we dump their contents, we can obtain a checksum for each of them. A checksum is a calculation based on the contents of the ROMs. Their values serve as an identity of sorts. We'll use the checksums as a value to compare these contents to those of the Revision 1 ROMs. So let's set them aside and examine the Revision 1 cartridge contents. This should help us start to build a timeline of release. NES UM1 on the program ROM and NES UM0 on the character ROM. Looks like the program ROM was changed when we moved from Revision 0 to Revision 1, but the graphics data in the character ROM remained the same. The checksums for both these ROMs validate this when compared to the checksums from Revision 0. The character ROMs match, and the program ROMs do not. What about the timeline? Well, the date code on the program ROM is hilarious. I believe this mask ROM was manufactured by Panasonic, and their date codes are like fun little logic puzzles. Assuming I am correct, the manufacturing date is 0 for 1990. The 6 means June. Panasonic divides any given month into thirds and indicates which third of the month manufacturing took place using symbols. A line below the number means the last third. This means we start with the number 21 and add the single digit contained in the date code after the month, the number 1 in this case. It would seem, and you chip experts can validate this, that the program ROM was manufactured on June the 22nd, 1990. Note that the MMC3 mapper chip appears to have been made during week 32, early to mid-August. The CIC security chip looks like it was made at the end of August, week 34. So perhaps this cartridge was made at the end of summer of 1990. We don't know for sure, but we do know that the software update was provided to manufacturing before June 22nd. USA Super Mario Bros. 3 received its update the same year it launched. With 2 cartridges, we only have 2 dates to compare for each ROM type. However, I happen to have a third cartridge to examine. Let's open it up and check it out. This one is also Rev 0. Both the program ROM and character ROM were manufactured during the second week of 1990, a couple of weeks after the program ROM for my original copy was made. That doesn't get us much closer to June to narrow that gap that bridges Rev 0 to Rev 1. In terms of first-hand analysis, this is all I have, 3 carts. What about third-party data? The NES Cart database is a great website to obtain chip information, and many entries exist for Mario 3. Let's include them and sort by program ROM date. The latest date of manufacturing for Revision 0 here would be the 10th week of 1990, about 3 weeks after launch. The earliest date of manufacturing for Revision 1 here looks like week 24 of 1990. So the change in manufacturing took place sometime between March the 5th and June the 11th of 1990. This obviously includes whatever time was required to switch production to a new revision for the ROMs and the cartridge labels. Of course, any of you that own a cartridge could certainly open yours up and contribute ROM dates to help narrow down the gap between releases. Revision 1 probably hit stores in summer of 1990. If you got Mario 3 for Christmas that year, it was very likely Revision 1. But let's get back to the game itself. What else changed? Perhaps the most infamous issue with Rev 0 is the line, "Miss twice and you're out," during the instructions for the Spade Match game. This was changed to, "You can only miss twice" in Rev 1. Obviously, there isn't enough space to correct the word to YOU''RE, so they reworked the third line in the text box. No big deal. As for Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo, well, I mentioned earlier that it seemed to have used the Rev 0 script as a base, and the Spade Match game is no exception. How embarrassing. As for Mario Advance 4 for the GBA, the text from NES Revision 0 was used and corrected. So this was a grammar fix. Nothing to do with localization of terms in this case, but there is a lot to do with localization in our next set of changes. After rescuing the princess, the game showcases art and maps from all 8 worlds. Each world has a name, and these names did anything but stay the same in Mario 3 releases over a period of the game's first few years. Even the Mario 3 strategy guide took some liberties. Once you get past Grassland for World 1, it starts to look like a roundtable discussion for names that was never resolved. Feel free to pause the video and take a look at these differences. Which names do you like best? Personally, I really dig Kupahari Desert for World 2. These changes, Kuribo's Shoot, You're Out, and the world names are well known, but they aren't all the changes made for the Rev 1 release of the game. How do we find out what else changed? Just keep playing the game and look for differences? That seems like finding a needle in a haystack. Well, it all comes down to bytes. Whatever changes were made from Revision 0 to Revision 1 are present in the ROM. Changes aren't just going to materialize out of thin air, those bytes are here. Let's use just the extracted program ROMs and do a file comparison between them using a hex editor. Every single byte that is different between the two ROMs is illustrated here. While this list of differences includes every change, it doesn't help us much in terms of understanding. However, when we pair it with an emulator's debugger window for a given revision of Mario 3, we can locate the bytes inside the game's disassembled code and data. Here is the list of every single byte changed between the two ROM revisions, courtesy of our hex editor. The grammar fix, the mention of Kuribo's shoe in the princess's letter, and the world name changes occur at these locations, shown in decimal. They are all lettering changes for words, and this basically means the tile IDs used for the graphics changed for the associated screens. There's a lot more that changed in the ROM besides just these three things. These other areas may seem like a ton of changes to investigate, but hold your horses. When changes are made to assembly code and the program is reassembled, the addresses of various subroutines or blocks of data are going to change. One example would be the location of the jump handler subroutine. In revision 0, it is located at address FE92. In revision 1, it is located at address FE99, 7 bytes later than it used to be. The code is identical, but the location in the ROM is different. What this means is that every single call to this subroutine that exists elsewhere in the ROM needs to have this address changed. As for this example in the bytes in our comparison, all of these locations in the ROM are just references to the jump handler's address. All of them are just a change from 92 to 99. Obviously, many other byte changes had to occur for various other subroutine calls besides the jump handler. If we were to eliminate all of those instances from our byte comparison list, there wouldn't be much left, except for one thing. A difference in a few lines of code that are used to build the status bar on the bottom of the screen. How curious. Programmers take a bug and find a fix for it. We are going to take a fix and find a bug. Time to get technical. NES VRAM provides enough space for 2 screens worth of background information. The values in VRAM represent the tile IDs that make up a given background, called a name table. Let's label these two areas A and B. The system is designed to allow these 2 screens to be accessed via 4 sets of addresses. The emulator showcases the address layout paired with VRAM backgrounds, like so. Which of the 2 A-B screens each of the 4 addresses reference depends on what we call mirroring, and you'll see vertical or horizontal mirroring used. Horizontal mirroring will stack the 2 different screens on top of each other and mirror them horizontally. Vertical mirroring will line the 2 screens up side by side and mirror them vertically. Programming can choose a mirroring method and use the desired addresses to maintain background information and assist with scrolling. While a game like Super Mario Bros. Scrolls horizontally in a single direction and is therefore quite simple in this regard, Super Mario Bros. 3 has multi-directional scrolling and maintains a status bar at the bottom of the screen. It is a bit more complicated as mirroring and scrolling methods change often throughout gameplay. Complicated enough that perhaps the smallest oversight in one section of code would create a small bug. We need a more intimate understanding of backgrounds, mirroring, and scrolling in order to explain the bug, so let's look at a few games. I may black out addresses at times in order to make things easier to follow. Super Mario Bros. Uses horizontal scrolling, so we want the 2 screens in VRAM, A and B, to be side by side. They are therefore mirrored vertically for addressing purposes. This method allows tiles to be updated outside the scroll window before being scrolled onto the screen, as there is 1 full name table's worth of background tiles available outside the scroll window at any time. Metroid can scroll either horizontally or vertically. The mirroring method changes depending on the scrolling direction desired when you enter a new area. Horizontal mirroring allows the A-B screens to be stacked on top of one another as we move up this corridor. When we reach this point and enter the door on the right, the mirroring type changes to vertical so the screens line up side by side. This allows A and B to be used for horizontal scrolling. Now we can continue on our way and scroll left and right. So is mirroring just the opposite of scroll direction? Is that the crude explanation? Not quite. Ghosts and Goblins uses vertical mirroring and can scroll in 8 directions. What mirroring method do you use if you need to move horizontally and or vertically at any point in time? The game slaps new tiles down on multiple sides of the playfield as needed. You can see those new tiles written to the name tables as their rights appear in red on multiple sides of the scroll window with the game slowed down. G&G doesn't have the luxury of 2 extra screens worth of tiles on both the horizontal and vertical axes. Scrolling in multiple directions means programming had to be crafty with tile updates. As we move forward in time on the NES, we reach games that use the MMC3 mapper chip and the interrupt functionality that mapper provides. The interrupt allowed developers to render a playfield to one name table and a menu, for example, to the other. Mega Man 3 is designed to use the same mirroring type as the intended scroll direction. That means the addressing is set in such a way that a single screen scrolls onto itself. This frees up the second name table to hold the weapon selection menu that scrolls up from the bottom of the screen when you press start. The MMC3 mapper chip's interrupt allows the game to know when to stop rendering from one address block in VRAM while drawing to the TV and jump to another address block in VRAM to finish all the graphics for that frame. We covered this in the Mega Man 3 and MMC3 mapper episode. Screen jumping, or technically name table address jumping during rendering, is very relevant for Super Mario Bros. 3. Mario 3 has a status bar at the bottom of the screen at all times, including when scrolling occurs. Even though it is always there, the mirroring type, and therefore which name table holds the status bar, will change depending on where we are in the game. In World 1-1, horizontal mirroring is used. This allows for the level to be stacked 2 screens high. Mario can fly upward with multi-directional scrolling. The status bar is parked at the bottom of the second of 2 screens in VRAM, name table B. So in a standard stage like World 1-1, the status bar tiles are written starting at 2B00. The MMC3 interrupt tells the program when to jump from drawing the playfield to drawing the status bar. Let's call this the default method. Now the Spade games, on the other hand, use vertical mirroring. That means the status bar is drawn at the bottom of name table A in VRAM this time, and is accessed in code by addressing bytes starting at 2300 hex. The game still maintains a status bar inside a specific name table in VRAM, but which name table, and therefore which address is used, has changed versus what we used in World 1-1. Is that it? What else could there be? Oh wait, Mario 3 has a level that is a bit out of the ordinary versus the others, doesn't it? There is a vertical-only scrolling area in World 7-1. This level uses vertical mirroring for the sake of vertical scrolling. The playfield is written to name table A and scrolls upon itself. The status bar is written to name table B. And this is where the Revision 0 bug comes into play. The code responsible for writing the 3 cards to the status bar at the bottom of the screen writes the cards to the wrong address. It writes them to the 2B100 block, an area occupied by the playfield, rather than the 2700 hex block, the place where the status bar resides. When we first start the level, the game is using the default method in this entry zone. Horizontal mirroring with screens stacked on top of one another, just like our first example in World 1-1. As soon as we enter this door, the mirroring type will change to vertical mirroring for a vertical scrolling level. Keep your eyes on the cards. They disappeared. Mario didn't lose them from his inventory, they just weren't written to the proper name table in VRAM, to the proper place to be shown on the television. If we play through this section of the game and enter the pipe to emerge near the exit, the mirroring style returns to default, and the cards return as well. While the code responsible for writing an M for Mario or an L for Luigi takes the vertical scrolling level into account by knowing to write to 2700 hex, the code for writing the cards does not. That is where the code change is made for Revision 1. It now uses a similar code structure to the building routines for other items in the status bar and renders the cards in their proper place. A simple fix that was more or less a copy-paste from somewhere else. 7 new bytes of code were required for the change. How did they have the ROM space for this? At the end of the ROM, there are several bytes that contain the value FF. They are unused bytes. 7 bytes were needed for the code change, so 7 of these FF bytes were repurposed as new code earlier in the bank. Of course, this means that all the bytes following the change were shifted down 7 bytes. And that explains why so many subroutines in the last bank at the end of the ROM needed their address bumped forward by 7 bytes. So is there any way we can experience the bug as it happens? As a matter of fact, yes. With a little bit of hacking, we can slow things down and illustrate the bad tile placement in revision 0 using the emulator. Let's step through the door. With a blank canvas for both name tables, the playfield is rendered inside name table A, and the status bar is rendered inside name table B. With vertical mirroring active for a vertical scrolling level, the code renders the status bar template to the proper name table. Notice that values contained within are the defaults. After the default status bar is rendered, tiles are replaced with values relevant for the current gameplay session. The cards are rendered in the wrong place, name table A. The P meter, coins, lives, points, time, the M for Mario, and the world number graphics tiles are placed in the status bar in the proper name table. After that, it starts writing the playfield. As the tiles are written, it updates the attribute table and therefore sets the palettes. These changes happen in chunks. Eventually, the playfield tiles overwrite the card tiles. As far as the playfield graphics are concerned, the bug never happened. The loading is complete, and we've entered the door to World 7.1. With a small code fix in place in revision 1 of Mario 3, the cards are written to the proper name table and show up at all times while inside the level. The bug is gone. 2 versions, different data, different code, different localization choices. A bit of history we can still access in physical form as it hails from the offline era of game updates. Maybe you own a cartridge for Super Mario Bros. 3 and didn't know which revision of the game you had until now. Well, I hope you enjoyed our little investigation into these differences. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this one. I also have a Patreon available if you are interested, and thanks for watching.